Hi everyone, I'm Kaius with a K. At the time of recording this video, Hallo Ween is upon us, and as much as I've wanted to create a scripted video to get into the spirit of this oh so spooky time of year, I've never really gotten around to it. Whether that be because of a lack of creative drive or just not really having the time, I've missed out on about 3 or 4 Halloweens since I started this channel, and that kinda sucks. So for as long as time permits, I'm going to start just spitballing the video ideas I've had saved for Spooky Month, starting with this one, and maybe, hopefully, I'll get them all out over the course of the next few weeks. But if not, then at least this was a good starting point for subsequent years. I mean, let's be real, at my creative pace, you're lucky to see me put 1 video out on the right month, let alone 2. I've always had a fascination with videos where creators delve into what pieces of media creeped them out or gave them nightmares as a kid or whatever. It really is just interesting to see how people have developed around the media surrounding them when they were younger, and it gives people a perspective on media they didn't really find that creepy at all. Like, for example, I was never scared of the Tails doll from Sonic R, but I know like a bajillion people who were, and as a kid it always perplexed me as to why the Tails doll's identity in fanon was built around being the most terrifying thing ever. Maybe it was because of the Child's Play movies or because of some random creepypasta, but the point is it fundamentally changed the way our generation saw that character to the point where even the comics started referencing it. Creepy media can almost be considered formative in that sense, effectively changing the way a lot of us interact with media on a greater scope. Tails doll isn't the only example of this, like this picture of Homer Simpson is probably terrifying to some people because of the context of its use in online culture, and there are also probably a non-zero amount of people who were scared of videotapes because of Miss Sadako Yamamura's World Tour, also known as Ringu. There's also probably a lot of people who felt the same way about games like Five Nights at Freddy's or Undertale, but I wasn't a kid when those games dropped, and the thought that people who were kids when those games dropped are no longer kids is a reality I'm ill prepared to face. But I'm not here to talk about why that stuff is interesting in a generalised sense. You already know I'm on this shit because I want to share my creepy childhood fears. Well, not all of them are creepy. In fact, I think you'll find that I was a pretty fucking stupid kid when it came to being scared of basically anything. Before I transition into the main video, let me just make a disclaimer. I will be talking about screamers in this video. Some visuals from those screamers will be included, but there won't be sound, and I'll make sure to put a visual warning on the screen before any actual jump scare images are shown. Lastly, before I start, I want to say that 85% of my viewers aren't subscribed to No, I'm kidding, don't worry, it was a scary prank. I think the first thing most people can attest to is that sometimes TV and video media decides to choose violence, and in the process probably traumatizes a bunch of tots looking to get their fix of fiction. Maybe you saw that in fucking Cat from Flapjack, maybe you watched Courage growing up, and I'll probably get to this one day, or maybe TV and movies caused you to have an irrational fear of quicksand. Seriously, why were there so many quicksand scenes? Especially in the 80s and 90s. I think most people got this fear from that one scene from The Princess Bride, but for me it was Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School. I have now just publicly admitted to watching Scooby-Doo and the Ghoul School, no doubt changing the perception everyone had of me forever. So that was just a warm-up to get the vibe of the vid right. Now let's jump into the real shit that creeped me out. And oh boy is it stupid. How stupid can it be, you ask? Anyone remember that old PSA of the cartoon Firefly that tells you not to play with matches and he burns his wings off and causes a fire? Yeah. Anyway, ads. While I could talk about other PSAs here, I'm going to open up with a completely unrelated ad. An ad for soda. Soda! Do you guys remember Tangle? Okay, let me rephrase. Do you remember Tangle ads? They ran this one series of ads in the 90s that was so popular it was re-aired in the early 2000s, either that or it was just on a VHS tape I had growing up, I don't know. The ad featured characters getting tangled by this orange dude, and even though it was fairly innocuous and pretty whatever, This ad fucking terrified me. You could not convince a 5-year-old me that this Marge Simpson looking motherfucker wasn't going to burst out of my TV screen at night and kill my ass. He's called the Orange Man, which, I mean yeah, that sure is an orange man. And not only was this ad campaign popular, as was aforementioned, it was also very controversial. Remember that thing I mentioned about people getting tangled? Well, in essence, getting tangled was basically just getting hit really hard in the face by the Orange Man. Now, put yourself in the shoes of an impressionable young child being shown a massive ad campaign for a tasty drink, and you probably want to imitate it. People were hospitalized over this. I feel really bad for laughing when I found that out, but it's such an unbelievable sequence of events when you really think about it. Well, not really. I don't remember where I saw it, but there was this one PSA from I want to say the 90s. It was about drugs and it featured a Polaroid photo of a guy that progressively got worse. Maybe I saw it in school or something? It had pretty rancid vibes, and I think it still kind of unsettles me a little bit. I don't have a whole lot to say about it though, it just speaks for itself. There isn't really a whole lot I can add to it. Speaking of PSAs, there was this one anti-smoking PSA in Scotland that my parents told me apparently really freaked me out. It was about some monster or something and a kid who says, "This tastes boggin" at a cigarette. There's a really famous PSA about some aliens who chew on blue sticks which has that exact quote.
This tastes boggin.
But my parents strongly insist it wasn't that one, so either they're collectively misremembering, or I'm about to inadvertently start a lost media search. It could go either way. Last PSA, I promise, and some of you guys have probably seen this one if you're from the UK. It's this video and DVD anti-piracy PSA called "The Pirates Are Out to Get You" that involves this guy with a branding iron destroying a bunch of home media. The drab colours contrasting with the fire and spark effects combined with that menacing music definitely became the reason this stuck with me, because going back and watching it again has made me realise how fucking stupid the dialogue in this thing is.
Piracy funds terrorism and will destroy our development and your future enjoyment.
I think that's probably a long shot, Chief. It kinda gives off the energy of that one clip of Lois Griffin running for mayor. You know the one.
What are your plans for cleaning up our environment?
Piracy funds terrorism.
One of the things that stuck with me most in this PSA was the hotline text. I don't know why. It is on the screen for quite a while, accompanied by a single elongated chord, but it doesn't seem that bothersome. As a kid I was super terrified of hotlines, because the font was always on fire when they were listed. It was like this in gaming instruction booklets too. I think I was worried that a hotline was actually a hotline, and my phone was going to just turn to sender the moment I dialed the number. I don't know. For now though, we're going to put a pin in the anti-piracy stuff because I'll definitely be coming back to this one later. Anyway, the last TV thing I want to talk about is this super niche surrealist horror show that nobody's ever heard of. I think it was called Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared definitely cuts it close since I turned 13 the year originally aired, but I don't know, it's a fond memory of mine, so I'm going to talk about it anyway. Channel 4 in the UK aired a show called Random Acts, which is basically a series of short indie films and thought pieces picked up or commissioned by Channel 4. It's still going to this day actually. These short films tend to be bold, striking and thought-provoking, and I have a great deal of respect for the programme, and I have been half tempted to make a video essay about it someday, but I don't really have many strong jumping off points or people involved to talk about it with for my research, so you know, if a Channel 4 representative is somehow watching this video and is interested in humouring a non-binary Z-list internet celebrity's video essay, my Twitter DMs are open. My experience of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared was blind, much like most of everyone else's. But being there on the ground floor for its initial airing and seeing it via happenstance due to just channel hopping that night definitely gave it some kind of allure and mystique to me, I think. My twin brother and I stumbled upon it in medias res, which is smart people talk for we missed the start. This does mean we missed the title card, which probably would have clued us into something being wrong because of the title, so we were definitely under the impression that it was some weird indie kids show parody and that it wouldn't go much deeper than that. Look, everyone's seen DHMIS by now, so I don't really need to tell you much more than boy were we wrong. When things got really uncomfortable, we just watched in stunned silence, and then when the short finally ended, I just turned to my brother and laughed off with some, well, that was uncanny one-liner, as if I wasn't thoroughly unsettled by the imagery I had seen. After that, I had pretty much pushed it to the back of the darkest corners of my mind for a few years, until 2013 when the short absolutely blew up, something that was definitely helped by the rise of Tumblr and fandom. Not fandom. Fandom, the word. I hate corporations! It was so refreshing to realise I wasn't the only person who saw that short, and I also wasn't the only one who was just a teensy weensy bit weirded out by it all. Plus, since I was a fair bit more mature by that point, I was actually able to glean the imagery and meaning that was being portrayed, which gave me a new appreciation for Don't Hug Me I'm Scared. Not to mention it was just fun to see content creators reacting to it back in the day. Speaking of content creators though... The internet is, as you almost definitely know by now, a place where millions of varieties of information can be exchanged easily in multiple formats. That does include a bunch of weird and creepy shit, as some of you may have actually learned the hard way when watching a seemingly innocuous internet video only to be met by a zombie, or an eyeless face, or lots and lots of Reagan McNeil. Reagan McNeil. I'm of course referring to screamers or shock sites, which is technically a different thing, but I think it's culturally close enough to screamers to share this segment. I know these are still a soft spot for some people, so I'm not going to show any of the particularly infamous screamer images unwarned. There will always be a 5-second heads up on screen in case you want to tab out, and these images usually won't be shown for more than like 10 seconds at a time. The amount of time it will be up for will also be written before it appears. My brother and I first stumbled upon the scary car commercial when we were about 9 years old and hanging out with our uncle who was also a kid at the time. And that was my first screamer. For the purposes of this video, I rewatched it 14 years later, and even now it still got a jump out of me. But not because I was actually scared this time, because I was expecting the scare. It was because the scream audio is really fucking loud. Here's a screenshot of the video's audio in Audacity. You can be the judge of whether or not I'm overreacting. I referred to it as the scary car commercial, but others may have known it under different names. Auto, Ghost Car, Spooky Car, and of course, Keffi Coffee Car Commercial. If you didn't know already, this was part of a real ad campaign for Keffi's Coffee, and the ad campaign featured not just one, but 8 TV ads and 4 radio ads, all with the same premise of a seemingly calm B-roll, followed by a screaming man dressed as a monster. It was supposed to simulate how awake the coffee would make you feel, and there were also self-parody ads with significantly more benign and goofy endings to advertise their latte variant, which I think is very cute. Obviously though, these ads were not taken too lightly by audiences and were axed from TV and radio pretty soon after their launch, which I can only assume added to their general obscurity, which helped them pop off in the mid to late 2000s YouTube culture. The Maze, also referred to as the Scary Maze game, is another such cultural landmark that I would even dare say is like the sister product of Keffi Auto. Not in practice, but in essence. Although The Maze isn't a YouTube video, it did gain a decent chunk of its cultural traction for YouTube and home video shows, which were the style at the time. Obviously the history of screamers goes back further than this, but I don't feel like documenting 50 years of history just for a single part of my segment, And I think that these two screamers in particular really caused the screamer boom of the mid to late 2000s. Basically everything at the time was at risk of being a screamer, and some people would comment screamer alert on the comments to save some other would-be screamer victims from a fate that I can only assume they suffered. What a martyr. I remember running into a screamer when I was younger that was called something like How to Prevent a Rickroll, and the jump scare was a picture of rotten teeth, and I shut my laptop so fast. Due to either YouTube's policy updates preventing shocking content or the creator just taking it down, I can't actually find this video anymore, but if you think you found it, send it to me on Discord or Twitter or something, I don't know. Speaking of lost screamers, reminder that there's a search for a lost Mario 64 screamer called Super Mario 64 Big Star Secret. I also remember this one called Where's Waldo that was just, you know, where's Waldo? Waldo himself was removed from the image, and after about 30 seconds a screamer appears. I always recall the scream sounding familiar, and apparently it's from Mortal Kombat 2, so I've been vindicated after like 15 years, yay! The screamer boom probably affected a lot of kids, and maybe media in general, as jump scares became significantly more mainstream for reaction videos, which is saying a lot because they were already pretty mainstream. I'm sure most of us as kids eventually started seeking screamers out on purpose in order to desensitize ourselves to them, or perhaps just out of morbid curiosity, and I know this because I asked friends around my age. Luckily though, due to the Screamer Wiki, which was a imperative resource in this video, it's significantly easier to navigate this kind of thing to sate one's morbid curiosity, and I admit to having ended up distracted more than a few times while writing this video because I was browsing the site, mostly hitting random page and seeing what I landed on, which isn't a practice I recommend to people who are sensitive to certain subjects, because admittedly the content warning info box is not very informative on the kind of content being warned about. Written media is up next, and there is no better example of written horror stories on the internet than creepypasta. I think I first frequented the creepypasta wiki when I was about 11 or 12, and although most people's first creepypasta was probably that one SpongeBob Lost episode, or that one Mickey Mouse creepypasta, or even that one Rugrats furry which has a Vocaloid song about it somehow, by Crusher P. For me though, the beginning of it all was this stupid fucking Flygon. The pasta was called Tommy Boy, and I don't really know how to go into detail without sounding way too interested, but basically a girl performs some summoning ritual with her friends to get this Darkrai plush, and then her little sister finds a shiny Trapinch in Pokemon Emerald, and the shiny Trapinch is causing the little sister to be obsessed and only pay attention to it, resulting in the older sister intervening, and all kinds of shit happens. Actually reciting the story isn't something I'd be good at, and criticising it as I go along I would be even worse at, but you know, if Yuri of Wind happens to be watching this vid, maybe he can take a whack at it. It's not particularly notable by any means, and I don't know why I read this one first. There were a lot of Pokemon creepypastas of questionable quality that I read over the years. Hellbell, Pokemon Black, Buried Alive model. I'm diverging a little off track here. There was also this one Mickey Mouse creepypasta, everyone knows the one, I know it has a name, but I don't really like saying it. Mickey walk cycle 3 minutes of nothing, things get weird at the 6-minute mark. The video comes back on with a warping screen and with moaning, groaning and blood-curdling screaming, sounds that would surely go on to live on in our culture through Mr. Incredible Becoming Uncanny videos. Great. No, I'm fine, it's fine, keep fucking scrolling. There was also Dead Bart, the one where Bart is dead. I don't really know what you want me to say here. The ending of this one creeps me out mostly because of the weird and scary implications of it. And that one Squidward one that I reread recently, and all I could think was, man, this shit is just over the top edgy. The main thing of Lost Episode creepypastas that got to me as a kid was that they just really felt like they were unsafe to partake in, like I was doing something I shouldn't have been doing, like bad things were going to happen to me. You know, just thoughts from the back of my mind. I find it really hard to look back at creepypasta through a lens of true, pure nostalgia though, because they were just hard to appreciate. There's something to be said about the romanticization of extremely sensitive and sometimes triggering topics in stories that were primarily written by children and teenagers. I don't think I can add a lot to that dialogue, but you know, I can at the very least present it. That's kind of a heavy note to end this segment on, and I don't really know how to advance to the next segment, but you hear about video games? Video games probably have the widest array of unsettling things, likely due to their much more interactive scope. While of course the horror can come from the game itself from an intentional design standpoint, sometimes the horror of a game makes itself. Sometimes the game glitches out in a weird way, or something spawns when it shouldn't. Sometimes though it can be none of these things. Sometimes it can be Witch for the Game Boy Advance. Witch, which is stylized as W.I.T.C.H. is a manga-inspired magical girl comic published by Disney Italy that also got its own TV show. It's about 5 girls who control the 5 elements: water, fire, earth, air, and energy? The game follows the story of the animated series, and it also features this thing. So I don't know what the fuck it was about this giant spider bitch, but she freaked me out. Like, really freaked me out. And I'm not really an arachnophobe or anything, so that's surprising. I think maybe I saw it glitch out at one point and that turned me off from it forever. My siblings and I were stuck on this level and we never got past it. Apparently it's in the end game as well, and it isn't actually that hard because it seems like you don't actually fight it, so we were so close to the end of the game and didn't know what to do because I guess we just didn't know what the power of love was back then. Okay guys, I got the embarrassing one out of the way first, we can move on to the good stuff now. Mortal Kombat. My first Mortal Kombat game was Mortal Kombat Trilogy, along with the game giving me an extremely unrealistic expectation of the length of loading times. It was mostly just a way for my siblings and I to mash some buttons and desperately try to understand the lore of a series we'd arguably missed the bus on. A lot of the time though, we'd just do 2-on-2 and 8-player combat together because, well, Mortal Kombat AI is cheap as balls, everyone knows this by now. It has infamously cheap AI design, but then again, most fighting games did, which was something I learned the hard way when I played Tekken 1 last year. Oh, for oh my god, I've never felt such a rush of dopamine in my life. Is this why people do drugs? It's fucking over, I never have to play this shit ass, ugly fucking motherfucking Luxo Junior ass looking game in my life ever again. Anyway, 8-player combat has the distinction of being the only multiplayer mode to give you access to Shao Kahn's treasures, which is like a little post-game thing you get access to in the arcade mode. Something to note is that in the menu of Shao Kahn's treasures, it isn't made abundantly clear which option does what. If you don't have the options memorized or come from a pre-Google era, you're essentially picking a feature from a hat. One such feature is the fatality demonstrations. It wasn't really the fatalities themselves that scared me for the most part, but the audio accompanying them, which was almost entirely silent besides noises of impact and screaming. I remember I would hide behind the couch when these were happening and my sister or parents would have to tell me when it was over. The fact that this never really stopped me from enjoying Mortal Kombat back then is kinda crazy now that I think about it. So when Mortal Kombat Armageddon rolled around, my brother and I knew we had to get our hands on it. We had to make our dream character, Chemtra. And I remember having to insist to our mum that we weren't gonna be scared before she bought it. So we got home, put it in our PS2, loaded it up and decided to watch the demo reel. Kung Lao vs Sector, Tekunin Airship, and minutes later it was right back to the store from whence it came. Yeah, I think the two of us probably set a new any % world record for that one. Much like an 18+ game does not belong in the hands of 8-year-olds, game discs do not belong in CD players, much to many a CD-age kid's chagrin. Chagrin? I don't fucking know. I can't tell you how many games I tried to put in my parents' CD player. Most of the time it would just play read-only data, which sounds It sounds alright. In the PS1's case, you could actually listen to the track sometimes if you just skip the data track, such was the case for the aforementioned Mortal Kombat trilogy. However, some games had allocated disk space specifically into telling players who put their disc in a CD player to put that thing back where it came from, or so help me. People are probably most familiar with this in the Sega CD's case, and if you're tired of hearing about that, well, I have bad news. The Sega CD track Zero Warning is as follows. Here's a timestamp if you want to skip it. I'm just going to play it in its entirety.
Warning. This disc is for use with the Sega CD system only. This disc contains CD-ROM data and is not for audio use. Please press stop on your disc player now. This disc contains CD-ROM data that may damage your audio system. Please stop playing this disc immediately.
So what's creepy about this? It's kind of unsettling, right? I mean, the professional sounding, almost robotic voiceover and the sick 90s guitar shredding juxtapose each other a lot, and we as people aren't wired to deal with contradictory stimuli like that. This is called cognitive dissonance, or the uncanny valley, which yes, can also be portrayed via audio. There's a really interesting paper about this, so I'll link in the description, but basically it stipulates that sounds that are familiar but defamiliarized somehow, or the context in which certain sounds are played, can achieve the uncanny valley effect. Moreover, the Sega CD audio is just really good at conveying a sense of urgency, which is absolutely what it sets out to do. The distorted guitar and the woman's statements becoming more and more urgent. For example, first she says this disc is not meant for audio use, at the halfway point she says stop now, and by the end she says stop immediately. Conveying urgency is good for these things, since obviously the manufacturers didn't want you to do this in the first place. Urgency can also be conveyed through error screens and game over screens. Some game over screens really scared me as a kid, and I know I'm not alone there. The one that sticks out to me the most when I think about game over screens that creeped me out definitely goes to Tarzan for the PS1, which would show a static game over screen with a random quote telling you how much you suck at the game. Most of these came from the Gorilla Guy, and these were the ones that bothered me the most. I don't think I ever played Tarzan much, but I remember these game over screens constantly. I don't have a lot to say about many game over screens, so I'll just share a few more that unsettled me, like one after the other. Here's a timestamp if you don't care. I don't blame you.
Rest in peace, Chosen One. Your death has sealed the fate of everyone else on Earth. The Enclave triumphs, releasing the FEV virus into the atmosphere. Millions die, and the Earth falls silent again. Here's a picture of your corpse. Not pretty.
And lastly for this video, let's take a look at error screens. Blue screens, red screens, black screens, white screens, you name them. The self-awareness of a product knowing that something isn't quite right is enough to scare any kid, I think. Especially one who doesn't know why for some reason they've had control completely taken away from them, sometimes for good until they reboot their hardware. It's like a goddamn anomaly. The one that really got under my skin back in the day was the red screen of death from the PlayStation 2. Not to beat a dead horse with this one, but the discordant ambient noise definitely sells this one. It's just a wee bit chilling. For most error screens, the scary part usually comes from the fact that these things can almost absolutely never be anticipated. They're unpredictable and sudden. You never quite know when, where, or how these things will happen. You know, unless you're brute forcing a specific one or something. There were also hardware malfunctions, like the Red Ring of Death, which was basically the fucking boogeyman if you were a kid in the mid to late 2000s. If you owned an original Xbox 360 model, your console was guaranteed to fail from the Red Ring of Death at some point, and that's not even hyperbole. It was a matter of when and where, and that was it. And on the more creative side of things, we had anti-piracy measures, which are one of the most oddly fascinating things that theoretically have no right to be so, well, oddly fascinating. A pretty notable example is Earthbound, which made the game nearly impossible to progress and definitely impossible to actually beat, something which other games ended up taking inspiration from. A personal favourite unsettling anti-piracy of mine is the Abbey of Crime. I'm not going to try to pronounce its real name because I'll just butcher it, but it's on the screen. There's just something about the audio here that freaks me out. Lots of anti-piracy measures and PSAs, as we explored earlier in this video, were always a bit menacing, presumably because piracy is serious business. And these are definitely not the only ones that made me and others feel this way. In retrospect though, they're actually kind of refreshing and unique takes on an issue distributors were facing. There's just something about the implied self-awareness of an inanimate object, knowing that it isn't being utilised legally, that really gets my morbid curiosity neurons activating. Or, you know, at least there was before it was co-opted by all the little Timmies looking to upload their poorly edited Super Mario jumpscare videos without any real grasp on what makes horror work. It basically turned into the backrooms for Nintendo fans. By the way, kids aren't necessarily the issue here, don't get it twisted, it's just a lack of creativity. Little Timmies can be grown-ass men if they fucking wanna be. I don't know, this tangent is stupid. The Kubo shutdown can stay though, that one's my skrunkle and I won't tolerate any slander against it. And this one Spider-Man 2 DVD anti-piracy vid is so fucking funny. I don't know, I'll come back to this topic someday in greater detail, perhaps when the dumb fake anti-piracy jumpscare craze has definitively died down so that I can maybe explore it in good faith. So there you have it, some creepy and not so creepy things of more than a few varieties that stuck to the back of my head as a kid. I know this isn't really anything special for a Halloween video, but I wanted to get my foot in the door regarding this sort of thing, and maybe talking about extremely stupid things that would frighten me will give people courage to do the same. Or, you know, at the very least so they can laugh at how thin-skinned I was. It's pretty funny in retrospect that I grew to be such a huge fan of horror despite being squeamish at the slightest implication of horror. Like, I used to be scared of all this stuff, but now apparently like horror enough to have an entire video's worth of Dead by Daylight B-roll? That's just wild, but perhaps not exactly unheard of. Perhaps if I remember more of these things, I'll pick up this topic next year, but I'm not really the kind who tends to iterate on their previous work, so it'll probably be left as is. I'm definitely gonna leave the door open though. Until then, that's me done. I wish a happy Halloween to all, and to all, a good fright! Yeah, I had to get just one in. Happy Hallo Ween, everybody!